Buenos días con todos. Tito Fernández, Delegación de Perú.
Buenos días, Cito. Te saluda Washington Tineo, Delegación de Perú. Estamos en espera todavía.
Mucho gusto, Washington. Buen día. Exactamente, a esperar.
Yeah, so far they're just sitting. It's also because this validate
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, if I may call this meeting to order, we are running slightly late, but we are on time. Excellencies,
أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون والقارون، سيداتي سادتي، أود أن أرحب بكم في هذه الجلسة الافتتاحية لمؤتمر دول الأطراف السابع في إطار معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة. هناك 6 محاضرين مرموقين مدعوين، 3 منهم سيتحدثون شخصيا و3 سيتحدثون برسالة عن بعد وبفضل المشاركة عن بعد. أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون والقارون، من دواعي الشرف أن أدعو وزير الخارجية حول التعاون الدولي من جمهورية سيراليون البروفيسور ديفيد جون فرانسيس ليفتتح الجلسة والمؤتمر. وقبل توليه منصبه الحالي كان دارس الإسلام في جامعة برانسفورد، وبالتالي لديه معرفة شخصية والتزام كبير. بروفيسور فرانسيس، الكلمة لكم.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. دعوني أثني عليكم بداية على رئاستكم لمعاهدة التجارة الأسلحة المؤدية إلى المؤتمر السابع لدول الأطراف. وطبعا كان من دواعي الشرف وبشكل فريد لبلدنا أن ينتخب لهذا المنصب الموقر كرئيس لمعاهدة تجارة الأسلحة. دعوني أشكر أيضا أعضاء مكتبكم ولجنة الإدارة ورؤساء الأفرقة العاملة وصندوق الاستئمان الطوعي ولجنة الانتقاء، وكذلك المنتدى الخاص بتبادل معلومات حول تحويل الوجهة والميسرين للأفرقة العاملة الفرعية، وكذلك طاقم الأمانة على العمل الممتاز المنجز إعدادا لهذا المؤتمر. أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون الموقرون، إن الظروف الاستثنائية لجائحة كوفيد-19 التي أخلت بكل شيء كنا قد قبلناه وعرفناه كما هو عادي، لكن سيد الرئيس، أنتم ومجمل مجتمع معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة تمكنتم من أن تعدوا هذا المؤتمر الهجين إعدادا طيبا، حيث يشارك البعض منا شخصيا في مدينة جنيف، وحيث يشارك الآخرون على الإنترنت من عواصمهم أو أماكن عملهم. لا بد أن تثنوا على أنفسكم جميعا على مثل هذا الإنجاز. أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون الموقرون، إن حكومتي فخورة جدا لأنها مثلت إفريقيا كرئيس للمؤتمر السابع هذا. ومنذ البداية من رئاسة سيراليون التزمنا بأعلى مستويات الالتزام السياسي والقيادة لخدمة مجتمع معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة. وأنا أخاطبكم اليوم بالنيابة عن رئيسي صاحب المعالي الدكتور جوليوس مادا بيو، رئيس جمهورية سيراليون، الذي يحييكم بحفاوة ويثني عليكم على مؤتمركم الناجح. وكقائد سابق خلال الحرب المدنية وكدارس في مجال دراسات في مجال السلام، نفهم تماما سيدي الحاجة للعمل على أنظمة الأسلحة لأغراض تتعلق بالسيادة والمشروعية ولتنظيم الأسلحة العالمية بشكل كفاءة ولاستخدام هذه الأسلحة بشكل مسؤول. ولهذا السبب وبناء على افتراضي أو تولي سيراليون لرئاسة قيادة معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة، فإنه قدم 54 خطابا لرؤساء الدول والحكومات في ربوع العالم يحث بلدانهم لأن تصبح أطرافا في معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة. وهذه الخطابات قدمت من قبلكم سيد الرئيس للبعثات الدبلوماسية لرؤساء الدول والحكومات الحاضرة هنا في مدينة جنيف، وبعضها قد أرسلت بشكل مباشر لرؤساء الدول. سيد الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون المحترمون، إن تاريخ المؤخر للحرب المدنية في سيراليون ونزع الأسلحة والتحكم بالأسلحة جعلنا ندرك الحاجة لمنع الاتجار بالأسلحة بشكل غير مشروع ووصولها إلى مستخدمين غير مشروعين. والواقع هو أن عالمنا ما زال متضررا بشكل كبير بسبب الحروب والنزاعات، وحيث أن النساء والأطفال ولا سيما الفتيات والشباب والمدنيين متضررين بشكل غير تناسبي. وهدفنا بالتالي لابد أن نضع حداً لهذه النزاعات، وعلى الأقل أن نخفف من آثارها من خلال تقليص الكلفة البشرية والمعاناة البشرية المتسببة عنها. نحن نعرف من عمل اللجنة الدولية للصليب الأحمر ومجموعة الخاصة بإدارة الأزمات الدولية ومن خلال منظمات الإنسانية أن ما يقارب من 2 مليار من الناس يعانون من الهشاشة والنزاعات أو العنف. والتنبؤات هي أنه بحلول 2030 فإن نصف 2 مليار من الأشخاص سوف يشهدون فقراً مدقعاً ومجاعة وسوء تغذية وأمراضاً واعتماداً عالياً على المساعدة الإنسانية، وهم يعانون فقدان المياه والغذاء والمأوى وخدمات الرعاية الصحية والفرص الاقتصادية والخدمات الأساسية الأخرى. وما هو ساخر أصحاب المعالي هو أن 2030 هو تاريخ المتوقع للمجتمع الدولي أن يحقق أهداف الإنمائية المستدامة. وحتى الأمم السلمية والمستقلة يمكن أن تتوخى التداعيات الخطيرة لسوء استخدام الأسلحة التقليدية، فهذه تأتي في شكل عنف قائم على الجنس والعنف المجموعات والمنظمات الإجرامية عبر الحدود والإخلالات العمومية الأخرى. وبالتالي فإن التنظيم القوي لتجارة الأسلحة دون المس بالتجارة المشروعة والملكية المشروعة أمر حاسم، ولذلك نحن هنا اليوم. أصحاب المعالي، أيها المندوبون الموقرون، نحن العالم استجبنا دوما وبنجاح للتحديات التي تهدد تواجدنا، وقد شهدنا كيف أن جهودنا جماعية أدت إلى تطوير المبادئ الخاصة بقوانين الحرب كما هي متضمنة في اتفاقيات ومعاهدات جنيف وبروتوكولاتها. أصحاب المعالي، بالتالي فإن عولمة معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة وتنفيذها الكفء لابد من النهوض بها وتشجيعها من قبل كافة الأمم والدول وكافة الأقاليم والمناطق دون الإقليمية وفي التزاماتنا وتعهداتنا الدولية. وفي هذا السياق وباسم صاحب المعالي رئيس دكتور جوليوس بيو أحث كافة الدول التي لم تصبح طرفاً بعد في معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة أن تنضم إلى هذه المعاهدة. فسيراليون تؤمن أن معاهدة تجارة الأسلحة هي من بين أهم إنجازات في مجال التحكم بالأسلحة الدولية، وتؤدي دوراً أساسياً في النهوض بالسلام الإقليمي والدولي وكذا
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Professor Francis. I misspoke earlier on. Before his current assignment, Professor Francis was Chief Minister of Sierra Leone, but he's a long-time academic and a peace studies scholar. My next speaker is the distinguished Minister of Defense of the Republic of the Gambia. The distinguished speaker, His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Omar Faye, is a Sandhurst-trained military officer, was also his country's ambassador to Washington, and he is here on the special invitation of the President of Sierra Leone to be a part of us, and he will make a very interesting announcement. Excellency, Mr. Faye, kindly take the podium.
State parties to the arms Excellency, Madam Excellency, Mrs. Nubi Nakamitsu, Under Secretary General and High Representative for this Armament Affairs, Your Excellency, Mr. Niels Cambodia, Vice President, International Committee of the Red Cross, Mr. Eugene Gali, Executive Director, the Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace, Control House, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. On behalf of the government of the Republic of the Gambia, I am honored to address the 7th Conference of State Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty on behalf of my President, His Excellency, President Adam. Early this year, President Barrow received a letter from his brother, His Excellency, President Dr. Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone, inviting the Gambia to join the arms treaty. This invitation reminded us immediately that our country was the only one in West Africa that has not yet signed or ratified the treaty. So let me thank you, Mr. President, for your efforts to expand the membership of the ATT in these challenging times. Though we have not formally joined the treaty, Gambia has been a strong supporter of the war of the ATT. We have made important progress by formally establishing a national commission on small arms and light weapons, because the Gambia fully appreciates the importance of international cooperation. The theme of this presidency, which is to regulate the movement of small arms and light weapons to prevent the diversion. Illicit transfers and diversions from official stockpiles have become significant in conventional arms regulations in many countries in Africa and elsewhere. Many African countries and other countries in other parts of the world, including Latin America, the Pacific, and Southeast Asia, have suffered and continue to suffer the scourge of armed violence, armed conflicts, wars, and internal disturbances, partly as a result of the inadequate regulation of international arms exports. In this context, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the CSP7 president for choosing to focus on efficient stockpile management as a tool to contribute to the effective implementation of the treaty, particularly preventing and mitigating diversion of conventional weapons from licit to illicit markets. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by conveying to you with great pleasure His Excellency President Adama Barrow's decision to accede to the ATT and become a state party. The Gambia looks forward to formalizing the accession and subsequent ratification process and becoming a trustful and cooperative member of the ATT community. Finally, I wish to convey my government's appreciation for the collaborative spirit and leadership of our two ambassadors, Their Excellencies Ambassador Carr of the Gambia and Ambassador Gebri and their delegations at Geneva. We encourage their efforts to strengthen their collaboration with the ATT activities and community. I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Excellency. Thank you, Honorable Minister. We had wanted to keep that announcement for the last, but it's so urgent that we possibly couldn't wait. Thank you, and we look forward to welcoming the Gambia and to assisting through the proceedings of joining, the formal procedure of joining the ATT. Thank you so very much, and welcome to Geneva once again. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I will now move to our next speaker who will address the conference via a recorded video. Conference will now receive a message from the Sixth Secretary for Economic Affairs and of the Swiss Confederation, Her Excellency Madame Marie Gabrielle Inechin Flesch. Excellency, you have the virtual space.
Messieurs les ministres, Madame la haute représentante, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis. Bienvenue à Genève, welcome to Geneva. C'est un grand plaisir de vous accueillir au nom de la Suisse à la 7e conférence des États partis au traité sur le commerce des armes. La dernière fois que j'ai eu l'honneur de parler devant vous fut lors de la conférence préparatoire à la première conférence des États partis en 2015 à Genève. Il est intéressant de voir l'évolution du traité au cours de ces 6 dernières années. Je suis heureuse de constater les avancées importantes réalisées dans le domaine de la mise en œuvre, de la transparence et de l'universalisation. Le traité est passé d'une 50aine à 110 États partis. Nous avons ainsi progressé vers l'objectif d'un traité universel, même si beaucoup reste à faire pour l'atteindre. Au regard de la situation internationale, il est plus important que jamais de réaliser le plein potentiel du traité. Les conflits armés ont continué d'augmenter au cours des dernières années et de s'aggraver dans certaines régions. Ces conflits touchent particulièrement la population civile. Le commerce illicite des armes y contribue de manière significative. Vu ces développements, il est particulièrement bienvenu que cette conférence se focalise sur la consolidation des efforts visant à éradiquer le commerce illicite des armes légères et de petit calibre et à assurer une gestion efficace des stocks. Je remercie la présidente de la conférence, la Sierra Leone, d'avoir choisi ce sujet et d'avoir conduit des débats fructueux. En tant que traité contraignant, comptant 110 États partis, le traité sur le commerce des armes est un pilier essentiel pour la sécurité et la stabilité dans le monde. La Suisse s'efforce d'y contribuer et estime essentiel de mettre l'accent sur les 4 priorités suivantes. Premièrement, nous devons renforcer nos efforts pour une mise en œuvre efficace du traité. Les plans de travail pluriannuels des groupes de travail constituent une très bonne base à cet égard. Il faut faire fructifier ces efforts au mieux. Deuxièmement, réaliser pleinement les dispositions du traité portant sur les mesures de transparence est essentiel. Celles-ci sont centrales à son bon fonctionnement. À ce sujet, je me dois de faire part de notre préoccupation quant à la diminution régulière des rapports annuels d'importation et d'exportation d'armes. Il s'agit là d'une tendance à inverser dans les plus brefs délais. Troisièmement, il faut mieux utiliser le soutien apporté par le Fonds d'affectation volontaire et le programme de parrainage. Le partage des connaissances et expériences est extrêmement important, que ce soit par le biais de projets du Fonds d'affectation ou par la participation d'experts nationaux au groupe de travail à Genève. La Suisse continuera à contribuer à ces mécanismes. Nous saluons et remercions tous les autres contributeurs, et notamment l'Union européenne, pour son soutien qui vient renforcer les ressources du secrétariat dans ce domaine. Finalement, le traité doit pouvoir s'appuyer sur des processus et des structures pérennes. À ce sujet, je me dois de faire part de ma vive préoccupation du non-respect par de nombreux États parties de leurs obligations financières qui sont de nature juridiquement contraignante. La stabilité du secrétariat et les travaux liés à la mise en œuvre seront sensiblement affectés si la discipline financière ne s'améliore pas rapidement. Ce sujet devrait constituer une priorité pour le cycle à venir. Messieurs les ministres, chers amis, le traité sur le commerce des armes constitue une priorité de longue date pour la Suisse. Elle soutient le traité non seulement en tant qu'État partie, mais également en tant qu'État hôte. Nous nous réjouissons de pouvoir l'accueillir dans un environnement facilitant la coopération avec de multiples acteurs agissant dans des domaines connexes à ceux couverts par le traité. Il nous semble important de profiter de tous les avantages qu'offre Genève pour assurer une mise en œuvre efficace. Nous sommes pleinement convaincus que sous la direction avisée de sa présidence, cette conférence fera progresser nos objectifs communs. La Suisse est prête à s'engager activement pour faire avancer les discussions. Je souhaite une semaine fructueuse à toutes les participantes et tous les participants et je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Excellencies, I would like to thank Madam Inishin Flesh for a very kind and very substantial statement. Thank you very much, Excellency. By extension, I would like to thank the government of Switzerland for the support throughout this presidency and before to the Arms Trade Treaty, including, if I may add, the free provision of this hall that we are having this proceedings. Thank you very much, government of Switzerland. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will now move on to our next speaker, who will also address this conference via a recorded video. Conference will now receive a message from the Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Her Excellency Ms. Azumi Nakamitsu. Excellency, you have the virtual floor. Thank you.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I am honored to be addressing you today at the 7th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. I congratulate Ambassador Guberi of Sierra Leone for his able stewardship of the ATT process. Your conference takes place against the backdrop of a persistently complex international security landscape characterized by heightened tensions, chaotic multilateralism, and seemingly unrestrained global arms competition. Military expenditures have continued to rise, reaching a staggering $1.981 trillion in 2020. The global circulation of small arms and light weapons is now estimated at 1 billion. Despite the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' call for a global ceasefire over a year ago, arms continues to flow, conflict continues to rage, and the rights of the world's most vulnerable people, women in particular, continue to be eroded. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to place unprecedented strains on our social and economic systems. It also illustrates the pressing urgency of preventing diversion for armaments of the world's resources so that the international community builds back better from this pandemic. Excellencies, the Arms Trade Treaty established the first ever internationally applicable legal standards for the trade of conventional weapons. The treaty's scope, covering all major categories of conventional weapons, small arms and light weapons, is critical. Universalization is crucial for the success of a treaty. 110 states have joined the ATT so far, thus agreeing to adhere to its highest common standards in international arms transfers. Today, 7 out of the top 10 exporters of arms are states parties. However, the other 3 top exporters, which control approximately 60% of the global arms export market, are not. 7 of the top 10 importers also remain outside of the treaty. I welcome the accession of China to the treaty a year ago and take this opportunity to call for a stronger engagement by all important actors. Excellencies, the ATT has provided an invaluable platform for discussion between stakeholders on important issues in international arms trade. This year's priority theme, the strengthening of efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, and ensuring efficient stockpile management, is particularly timely. I welcome the leadership of the President in addressing this important matter and his food for thought paper and recommendations. On the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations last year, the Secretary General called for multilateral solutions to today's global challenges. The fulfillment of the purpose of a treaty to contribute to international peace, security, and stability, to reduce human suffering, and to promote cooperation, transparency, and responsible action can only be achieved as a collective effort by all of us. The hybrid format of this CSP7, while being far from business as usual, also provides advantages that can be leveraged to engage meaningfully and effectively with a wider community of interested stakeholders, particularly from civil society, academia, and industry. My office and I, in partnership with the ATT Secretariat, remain committed to supporting you in fulfilling these goals. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I would like to thank the Under-Secretary General for the very positive statement of support and for the promise to continue our support. And I am particularly pleased that for the ringing endorsement of the thematic focus of this presidency, which is on the small arms and light weapons and their diversion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nakamitsu, for those kind words. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at this stage, I would like to invite the Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, His Excellency, Mr. Gilles Carbonnier, who is here with us right on the forum, to kindly take to the podium and address this conference. Thank you for being here.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, Professor David Francis, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by commending Your Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Omar Fie, Minister of Defense of Gambia, for the announcement that he just made that the government of Gambia has decided to accede to the Arms Trade Treaty. I think that this is an excellent news, and this contributes to the positive dynamics underlying the ATT process. So big word of appreciation about this announcement. Today, over 100 armed conflicts are being fought around the world. Many of them are ever more protracted. Besides, hundreds of armed groups around the globe are involved in other situations of armed violence, affecting tens of millions of people. Every day, staff members of the International Committee of the Red Cross, working in countries like Afghanistan, Mali, Syria, or Yemen, witness the acute suffering brought about by the misuse of arms, facilitated by inadequate controls over their possession, transfer, and use. As you know, the ICRC works to ensure that the victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence receive humanitarian protection and assistance. For 34 years, we have maintained operations in Afghanistan, where the recent upsurge in fighting has left countless civilians injured and displaced. More than 40,000 wounded Afghans have been treated at ICRC-supported medical facilities just over the past 3 months. It is heartbreaking to see our wards filled with people who have lost limbs, particularly children. Our medical and physical rehabilitation teams fear that there will be many more patients like them for years to come. South Sudan, too, exemplifies the suffering caused by the misuse of arms. 10 years after the independence, the country remains plagued by violence. Over a third of the population has been forced to flee their homes and is still unable to return. Our 3 surgical teams on site have cared for a staggering 9,000 patients wounded by weapons over the last decades. And a quarter of those treated for gunshot wounds have been women and children. In the absence of political solutions, wars rage on for years, fueled by the inflow of weapons and ammunition. Moreover, these days, parties to armed conflict rarely fight alone. They increasingly count on others for support, including in the forms of weapons. Such a multiplication in the number of partners and allies can lead to a diffusion of responsibilities, fragmented command chains, and the unchecked flows of weapons to the detriment of civilians. However, these support relationships also create opportunities to reduce the human cost of war. The ICRC, therefore, calls on states that support warring parties to leverage their influence and take practical steps to mitigate adverse humanitarian consequences. This includes putting in place all necessary safeguards so that arms are not transferred if there is a clear risk that they would be used to violate international humanitarian law or human rights law. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the ICRC welcomes the attention paid during this conference cycle, presided over by Sierra Leone, to the specific challenges raised by small arms and light weapons. Their widespread availability can fuel violence long after a conflict has ended, including gender-based violence. On a recent visit to Central America, El Salvador and Honduras, I met with many families who had fled armed violence. Around half of Central American migrants are from Honduras, where just between 2014 and 2018, 250,000 people were displaced because of widespread street violence, much of it linked to the use of small arms. The Arms Trade Treaty is a vital tool in addressing such violence and in strengthening international and human security. State parties have committed to subjecting the international transfer of conventional arms, ammunition, and parts and components to strict criteria aimed at ensuring the respect of international humanitarian and human rights law. Yet, all too often, there is an apparent tension between these commitments and actual practice. For the treaty to truly deliver on its promise of reducing human suffering, state parties must follow the letter of the ATT and act in accordance with its humanitarian purpose. The ICRC remains deeply committed to supporting faithful implementation of the treaty and promoting its universalization. We actively engage with state parties, encouraging them to share their experiences in giving effect to the treaty. And we firmly believe that exchanges on practical measures taken by states and on the challenges they encounter and seek to overcome are key to realizing the treaty's humanitarian aspiration. I thank you for your attention and wish you a successful conference.
Thank you very much. I can see that we are having a really good start. Thanks, Mr. Cabonier, for those positive statements, both of support, both for the conference, the presidency, but also for our thematic focus and some of the underlying issues that you mentioned are really very helpful. Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I will now move to our final speaker for this opening section. He will be speaking on behalf of civil society, and he will be addressing the conference remotely. I invite Mr. Eugene Ngali, the Executive Director of Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace, to address the conference. Mr. Ngali, please, the virtual floor is yours.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, I am honored to be here with you today, speaking on behalf of my organization, Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace, and on behalf of the Control Arms Coalition. I wish to express my deep gratitude to you, Mr. President, your team, and the ATT Secretariat for your efforts in organizing the 7th Conference of State Parties to the ATT in what are challenging circumstances. Mr. President, in organizing this conference, you have heeded 2 fundamental principles of the Arms Trade Treaty, which are transparency and inclusivity of all ATT stakeholders. We also wish to express our gratitude to the ATT Secretariat for their consistent and reliable coordination and support. Mr. President, the thematic focus chosen for the conference, curbing the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, with a specific emphasis on stockpile security, is critical to our region. The impact of the illicit proliferation and misuse of small arms in Africa cannot be overemphasized. It is evident in the number of ongoing conflicts, including the Sahel, Ethiopia, and the Central African Republic, in the rise of terrorism and violent extremism in the Lake Chad Basin, deadly election-related violence, secessionist agitations, and ethno-political militancy. Less evident is the fact that the illicit proliferation of arms has set back progress towards sustainable development in the region by decades. Overcoming obstacles to preventing the illicit trade in small arms in Africa and beyond requires a concerted effort by all states involved in the arms transfer chain. Through its provision on preventing diversion, record keeping, and reporting, and international cooperation, the ATT provides a strong legal framework for regulating the trade of arms and ammunition. But it is up to you, the states present here today, to, without exception, adhere to legal obligations under the treaty and fulfill its promise of reducing human suffering by adopting the highest possible standards and by establishing rigorous structures to regulate the global arms trade. You can make a difference in the lives of millions of people around the world. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, civil society is as active as ever in mobilizing government, regions, and the public to take concrete steps towards effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. We are ready to engage and assist in your efforts to bolster cooperation and assistance, highlight the importance of stockpile security, and to explore synergies with other relevant international and regional instruments. Civil society is uniquely positioned to work in support of both universalization and implementation of the treaty on behalf of those who need it, those who are suffering from the scourge of conflicts and gun violence. My organization, the Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace, in partnership with the Regional Center on Small Arms in the Great Lakes and Horn of Africa, has worked to raise awareness and mobilize relevant entities to address the consequences of small arms proliferation. As part of this effort, we sought to advance the universalization and implementation of the ATT by strengthening capacity and expertise among regional stakeholders and by highlighting synergies with relevant frameworks. With support from the Voluntary Trust Fund, in 2018, we were able to play a leading role in supporting Cameroon to become the 96th state party to the ATT. Similarly, with support from UNSCA, one of the few multilateral funding sources available direct to civil society, my organization provided technical assistance in the ECAS region towards the implementation of the Kinshasa Convention, the UN Program of Action, and the International Tracing Instrument, and by encouraging data collection for Sustainable Development Targets 6. We have provided support to government stakeholders in enhancing public security through weapons collection and instruction programs and the implementation of adequate stockpile management practices. Examples of successful civil society contribution, like ours in support of the ATT, can be found across all regions. I would like to take this opportunity to urge you to take advantage of civil society expertise and support. I also wish to encourage you to provide the necessary assistance to civil society to enable us to continue to support the universalization and implementation of the ATT. Direct assistance to civil society, in addition to grants, requiring a government partnership, is key to the development and implementation of many worthwhile projects. Civil society leadership provides opportunity for governments that may be unable to support or sustain a project, to make progress towards becoming a state party, or to set a path towards effective ATT implementation on the national and regional levels. Distinguished delegates, on behalf of my organization and Control Arms, I urge you to engage in the Arms Trade Treaty Become a state party if you have not. Report with transparency on your arms exports and imports if you have not. Anchor the export risk assessment into your national policies if you have not. Communicate with all actors along the arms transfer life cycle to ensure that weapons are safely transported and stored and stay out of the hands of those who would misuse them. And lastly, in this ever-changing world, review your own arms transfer decisions again and again to ensure that none will violate the provisions of the ATT. With this type of consistent engagement from all of us, together, we can achieve the purpose of the treaty to reduce human suffering. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you very much, Mr. Eugenie Ngali. Thank you. I thank you, civil society. I cannot stress enough, I cannot thank you enough for the massive support that I had throughout my presidency from civil society. And I encourage my successor to continue and deepen that collaboration. I think it's extremely useful. They bring the kind of perspective that we need as state parties to be able to fashion policies in a more humane and inclusive way. Thank you, civil society. Thank you very much for that great support. And thank you, Mr. Ngali, for joining us from Cameroon. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have now come to the end of the opening section of the conference. I would like to once again thank you very much and thank the invited speakers, who particularly those who are present with us, as well as those who participated virtually, for gracing this occasion and for the extremely positive statements of support and amplifying some of the issues that we deal with every day at ATT. Thank you very much. At this point, we'll now take a moment for a slight changeover from the opening section to agenda item number 2 of the conference. So once again, thanks invited guests, distinguished speakers. Thank you so very much. We shall now change a little bit, and to do some housekeeping. Extremely boring stuff, which I would don't like to subject you to. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, that was a very short break to spare our distinguished guests, inflicting on them this very boring detail of how the conference goes, some housekeeping. And so if I may call the meeting to order, we have now concluded the opening segment of the conference, which in my view has set the right tone for this conference, which starts today, of course, 30th of August, and will conclude on Friday, the 3rd of September, 2021. It is my honor to open the second part of the conference. We are here for the whole week, so be ready to see me every day, and let's all work hard together. Before starting with the regular proceedings of the conference, I would like to invite the head of the ATT Secretariat to convey a few very important housekeeping rules. Again, boring stuff, but extremely important. I yield the floor to you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before we advance further with the program of today, I would like to take this opportunity to inform you about some housekeeping rules, which will be very important for us to observe for today and for the rest of the week. We would want to advise delegates that interpretation into all UN languages is available during the meetings. For those of you who will be participating in this meeting remotely, you are able to access these languages by pressing at the bottom of your screen a button called interpretation. If you select this button, you'll see, or you'll have six language options available to you, and then you'll select the language that you would want to use. If you do not select a language, then you would listen to the statements as well as presentations in the language in which they are delivered. You can also mute the original language by tapping on the button Mute Original Audio in the Zoom. So you have an option to mute the original language. With respect to the speakers list, we have established a speakers list for the conference. This is published every day in the morning of every day, and we encourage delegates to observe or to check the speakers list on the website as published. When the time for open discussion comes, the president will call speakers in a set of 3 so that they can be able to ready themselves to speak when they are called upon to do so. If you are not on the speakers list as published, you still have an option to request for the floor, and you can do so in one of the two ways. One, if you are participating remotely, you can request for the floor through the chat function. But if you are in the conference room, like the delegates that are here now, you can still raise your nameplate, and the secretary to be able to recognize that. When the speakers list is exhausted as published on the website, we will then proceed on the list of speakers who have requested the opportunity to speak through either the chat function or through raising their name flags or their name plates. My apologies. Specifically, announcements for those who are participating via Zoom, we would want to mention or notify them of the following important aspects. We would request them to switch off their microphones during the conference. And I think it helps us to manage the disruptions there. But we are saying so particularly to those who are using or connecting to the meeting using the mobile phones. They seem to be a little bit problematic to manage. We request then delegates that are participating remotely to use the chat function as a mechanism to speak to the secretariat. We would want to discourage delegates to use the chat function as a medium of general discussion, because it makes it difficult for the secretariat to isolate the messages that we have to react to immediately. So it can still be used, but we would discourage the overuse of that. For delegates who are participating in person, who are present in the conference room, specific announcements to them are: we are required by the local authorities to ensure that we observe the COVID-19 protocols. And as such, therefore, the sitting here has been set up according to the requirements of protocol. So social distancing is one of the requirements. And secondly, would request that the delegates observe the protocols as well known. We also request delegates to limit their movement in the room unless it is absolutely necessary to do so. If you have questions for the secretariat, you can direct the questions to the secretariat via the Zoom function or via the chat function, Alternative, you can still proceed to the Secretariat and ask for whatever assistance you may need. But we're just requesting delegates to a large extent rely on the chat functions. And we are also requesting delegates not to congregate into groups, because that would be in defiance of the protocols as issued to us. Mr. President, that brings me to the end of the brief announcements I wanted to make. I would like then to hand over to you at this moment. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for the announcements. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in my capacity as president of the 7th Conference of States Parties, I again welcome all representatives of states parties, signatory and observer states, international and regional organizations, civil society and industry. It gives me great pleasure to observe that despite the uncertainty presented by the current pandemic, we are able to conduct this meeting in a hybrid format, which allows for a limited number of delegates to participate in the conference in person and for the rest of the other delegates to do so remotely. I look forward to your active participation and cooperation throughout this conference. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the Vice Presidents, the Management Committee, the Voluntary Trust Fund Selection Committee, the working groups chairs and facilitators, as well as the ATT Secretariat for their efforts in preparing and organizing this very important event in the calendar of the Arms Trade Treaty. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this conference was preceded by an informal preparatory process, including working groups meetings held in April 2021. The CSP7 informal preparatory process was designed and conducted with a view to creating a transparent platform for consultation and engagement with all states parties and other stakeholders on all aspects pertinent to the outcomes of this conference. We are hopeful that this process has infused a sense of relative certainty in all delegations on the expected outcomes of this conference. During the CSP7 informal preparatory process, I observed with satisfaction the high level of dedication and active participation by all delegates. The conference documents that have been prepared and placed before us bear testimony to this observation. I'll now move on, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, to agenda item number 2, which is adoption of the agenda. Distinguished delegates, you should have before you the provisional agenda for CSP7, which was prepared in accordance with Article 17 of the treaty and Rule 15 of the ATT's Rules of Procedure, presented to the CSP7 informal preparatory meeting and subsequently issued as an official conference document. May I take it that this provisional agenda can be adopted as the agenda for the 2021 7th Conference of States Parties to the ATT? It is so decided. The CSP7 provisional agenda is adopted. Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'll now move on to agenda number 3, item 3, which is organization of work. With the conference agenda adopted, I would now like, with your kind permission, to address a few conference organizational and procedural matters. Firstly, the ATT rules of procedure will guide the proceedings of this conference. For ease of reference, the rules of procedure are published on the ATT website together with the rest of the conference documents. Secondly, in accordance with Rule 10 of the rules of procedure, I would like to confirm that Mr. Dumisani Dladla in his capacity as head, in his very able, by the way, capacity as head of the ATT Secretariat, shall, and I quote, be the secretary of the conference and shall act in this capacity at all sessions of the conference and its subsidiary bodies. I'm particularly grateful to him. He's been such a really competent hand throughout my presidency. He's been a great team worker. Thirdly, pursuant to Rules 12 of the Rules of Procedure, I would like to confirm that on the 31st of May, 2021, the ATT Secretariat notified all states parties, signatory states, and the Secretary General of the United Nations in its capacity as depository of the treaty about the date of this meeting. The conference provisional agenda was circulated on 12th July 2021, and as prescribed by Rule 15 of all conference background documents were circulated on the 30th of July 2021. In addition to the above mentioned conference documents, they have been made publicly available to on the treaty website in Arabic, Chinese, English, Russian, and Spanish, all UN languages. Fourthly, in reference to the Rule 7.4 of the Rules of Procedure, the draft list of participants was circulated to all six parties on 25th of August 2021. The informing of the compositions of all delegations that have registered as participants to this conference under Rule 1 and 2, as well as those registered to attend as observers under Rules 3, 4, and 5. The updated version of the list of participants will be finalized at the conclusion of this conference and will be made available on the treaty website. Delegates are welcome to approach the ATT Secretariat with corrections of delegate information as necessary. Finally, when a draft list of participants was circulated to all parties on 25th of August 2021, the six parties were reminded of the possibility to present an objection against the representation of a delegation of a state party, signatory state, or observer at this conference to the President no later than 10 a.m. Geneva time on Saturday, 28th of August, 2021. I'm pleased to notify the conference that no participation objection was presented to me by the set deadline. In view of this, no procedural decision under Rule 7.4 shall be required. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at this stage, I would like to take the opportunity and remind delegations of the composition of the Bureau, the ATT Management Committee, and the VTF Selection Committee, and the chairs of the ATT working groups. The sixth conference of six parties elected Cyprus, Germany, Latvia, and Peru as the four vice presidents for the seventh conference of six parties, which together with the president make up the body informally known as the Bureau. With respect to the Management Committee, the fifth conference of state parties appointed the following state party representatives designated by each UN regional group as members of the Management Committee to serve for a period of 2 years up to the seventh conference of state parties. They are Costa Rica, Estonia, Germany, Japan, and South Africa to serve for a period of 2 years up to the seventh conference of states. With respect to the Voluntary Trust Fund Selection Committee, the sixth conference of states parties appointed Albania, Australia, Canada, Finland, Germany, Japan, Madagascar, Mexico, New Zealand, Republic of Korea, South Africa, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom to serve on the selection committee of the VTF for the period of up to the 8th conference of state parties. You will recall that the third conference of state parties established 3 ATT working groups. In accordance with the terms of reference of the 3 working groups, I appointed the following states to chair the respective working groups. Republic of Korea to chair the working group on effective treaty implementation, assisted by facilitators from Spain, South Africa, and Serbia. Mexico and Romania co-chair the working group on transparency and reporting. And I, in my capacity as CSP7 president and ambassador, my good friend Ambassador Villegas of Argentina, his capacity as the CSP6 president to co-chair the working group on treaty universalization. I would like to take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to the vice presidents, the bureau members, the management committee, the VTF selection committee, and the chairs and facilitators of ATT working groups for their support and invaluable assistance throughout my tenure as president of the seventh Conference of States Parties. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, section 3 of the Management Committee's Terms of Reference states that, with the exception of the President of the Conference of States Parties and the Secretariat representative, members of the Management Committee shall serve a period of 2 years with eligibility to serve a further term. This means that the 2-year term of the current members of the MC comes to an end at the conclusion of this conference. On Thursday, during agenda item number 10, matters pertaining to the 8th Conference of States Parties, the conference will be invited to appoint new members of the Management Committee for a period of 2 years. I therefore urge states parties to start the necessary consultations on this matter at this very early stage of the conference. In terms of Rule 9.1 of the Rules of Procedure, this conference should, before its conclusion, elect the president and 4 vice presidents for the following section of the conference from the representatives of participating states parties. Equally, on Thursday, during agenda item number 10, matters pertaining to the 8th Conference of State Parties, the conference will be invited to elect the next president and the 4 vice presidents. I enthusiastically urge you, state parties, to commence the necessary consultations on this point at this very early stage of this conference. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me now turn my attention to the conference provisional program of work, which you should have before you. To ensure that we make the best use of the time at our disposal, a flexible approach will be adopted regarding this program of work. In this regard, once the section has concluded, I may proceed with the next item on the agenda. Time indications on the agenda are to be considered as provisional, and delegations are advised to be prepared for adjustments as necessary and as determined by the president. I would now like to outline this conference, how this conference will proceed throughout the week to Friday. Number 1, we concluded the opening section of the conference earlier today. Agenda item number 4 will be dedicated to a thematic discussion on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. That's a topic extremely close to my heart, if I may add. This discussion will begin with a panel addressing various elements of this topic. Following that, delegates will be invited to participate in the thematic discussion through statements and questions to the panelists. Number 2, agenda number 5 will focus on treaty universalization, starting with the ATT Secretariat's overview presentation on the status of ATT participation. The co-chairs of the working group on treaty universalization, that's myself and Ambassador Villegas, will be invited to present their report to the conference on the status of work conducted by the working group in the intersessional period and make recommendations on treaty universalization approaches and activities that could be considered for implementation. Agenda item number 6 will initiate the conference discussions on treaty implementation in line with the provisions of Article 17.4 of the treaty. For practical reasons, this section will commence with the chair of the working group on effective treaty implementation presenting to the conference the report of the work conducted by the working group in the intersessional period between CSP6 and CSP7, including making proposals on how the treaty implementation work will be structured and carried out in the period after CSP7. After the report, Argentina will be invited to make a brief introduction or recommendations of its working paper. Thereafter, the conference will be invited to express views on the reports and other aspects relating to treaty implementation. Agenda item number 7 will consider the Secretariat's proposed budget, important for financial year 2022, as well as the Management Committee's proposal regarding the reappointment of the independent auditor for the ATT. Agenda item number 8 will focus on matters pertaining to transparency and reporting obligations under the treaty. The section will commence with the ATT Secretariat's overview presentation on the current status of reporting. After this, I will invite the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting to present their report to the conference on the status of work conducted by the Working Group in the intersessional period, including proposals contained in their report. During the same session, I will invite the chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum to make a brief introduction of the DIEF's reports and recommendations. Following the 2 reports, delegates will be invited to express their views on the reports. Agenda item number 9 will commence with the ATT Secretariat's overview presentation on the status of ATT finances. Following this, I will invite the Management Committee to present the revised draft guidelines on the issue of making financial arrangements with the Secretariat under Rule 8.1D of the ATT Financial Rules. Agenda item number 10, in accordance with Article 17.4 of the treaty, will consider the following aspects. A, matters pertaining to the preparations for the 8th Conference of States Parties, CSP7, including the adoption of the budget for the next ordinary session. B, election of the President and Vice Presidents of the CSP7 as per Rule of Procedure 9.1. And C, establishment of any subsidiary bodies as may be necessary to improve the functioning of the treaty. And this will include the Management Committee. Agenda item number 10. Kindly note that this is all spread out for the week. It's not happening on one day, obviously. So agenda item number 11 will present an opportunity for the President to make a final presentation of the draft final reports of the conference for consideration and adoption. And finally, agenda item number 12, we allow the CSP7 President to deliver his final remarks and invite the President of the ordinary section of the CSP to address the plenary. After this, perhaps to my relief, CSP7 will officially close, and to the relief, I'm sure, of almost everyone. With this explanation, may I take it that the provisional program of work is adopted? It is so decided. Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we are about to move to the next item, number 4, which is the thematic discussion on the topic small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. We'd like to invite the distinguished panelists to join us on the panel and those participating virtually to be ready. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this conversation is planned to run for the next 1 hour. This item introduces to the conference an important thematic discussion on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management within the framework of the ATT. You will recall that the Sierra Leone presidency selected this team as a priority team for CSP7. To kickstart this thematic discussion, we have a panel of 4 speakers, and I will be the facilitator for the panel. The speakers are as follows: His Excellency Professor David J. Francis, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Sierra Leone. We have His Excellency Marcelo Ebrard Kosobon, Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the United Mexican States. We have General Retired Christos Simon Fataki, Director of Institutional Development and Capacity Building, Regional Center on Small Arms. And we have Dr. Karapik, Program Manager, Ammunition Management Advisory Team. Following the speakers' interventions, delegates will be invited to participate in the thematic discussion through inputs and comments. I would now like to invite the panelists to join us. The conversation will begin with the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Sierra Leone, who will be joining me on this podium. And then we'll proceed to I'll now like to invite the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor David Francis, to join me on the podium. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much. Excellency, as I mentioned, there are 3 other speakers besides you, but I'll introduce the paper and be the facilitator for discussion. You will kickstart the conversation with your own thoughts on the thematic paper of Sierra Leone of this presidency. So let me begin with a few opening remarks. This paper, as I said, is very close to my heart and extremely important. Welcome. Thank you very much. This paper that we are discussing now, like my assumption of the presidency of the 7th Conference of States Parties last August, represents Sierra Leone's commitment to the effective implementation of national, regional, international arms control efforts. As you are all well aware, often weapons legally acquired by states end up being used by forces that they were not meant for. Illicit transfers and diversions from official stockpiles have become extremely significant in conventional arms regulation. Our own experience as a country of Sierra Leone in the 1990s during our civil war certainly mirrored the experiences of many other countries in Africa and in other parts of the world with respect to the suffering through the scourge of armed conflict, arms violence, wars, and all sorts of internal disturbances that result partly from the inadequate regulation of international arms export. It is for this reason that I made a very conscious decision to choose as my thematic focus the need to strengthen efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, and to ensure efficient stockpile management. Early on in my presidency, I was assured that there is a strong political will and commitment on the part of the international community to address this issue. This was evident in the overwhelming support for and adoption of the 2020 ATT resolution that contains a preamble paragraph PP5 on small arms and light weapons and operative paragraph OP9 that expressly, and I quote, urges states parties and signatory states to prevent and eradicate the illicit trade in conventional arms, including small arms and light weapons, as set out in Articles 6 and 7 of the treaty, and to prevent diversion to unauthorized end users of conventional weapons inter alia through efforts to improve efficient stockpile management. My presidency focused on how to engage all state parties and other stakeholders to link ATT implementation efforts firmly to the global framework for arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament. In this context, I developed a working paper setting out areas of arms trade supply chain that require further attention by states in the context of existing global regulatory framework and proposing a set of possible areas of state parties to consider for further inquiry and exchange or longer-term implementation. The paper before us proposes a set of outcomes that states could pursue to address the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and to strengthen stockpile management and security. It does the following. Number one, through mapping and better utilization of existing guidance and tools on the subject. By mandating the WGETI to formalize discussion on post-delivery cooperation and compliance with export documentation, including authorized end use. Through information sharing on effective and innovative stockpile management programs, by providing information on their national practices relating to mitigating measures in the context of Article 7.4 on GB7 prevention, including related to stockpile security, and by mandating the WGETI with support from the ATT Secretariat to identify and compile a list of existing relevant bilateral and multilateral assistance programs made available to states seeking such support. From the very start, I adopted a very transparent and inclusive consultation process in developing, finalizing, and producing as much of a consensus document as possible. Following extensive consultations, I have submitted a draft working paper for consultations and for adoption. That working paper is before you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and it is what we are now having a conversation about. Against this background and based on the positive feedback already received from state parties and other stakeholders, I really do have high hopes that the document enjoys your full support. I would like also to take this opportunity to thank all ATT state parties, signatory and observer states, and our partners in the civil society community for your invaluable support and expertise rendered to my presidency, particularly for your constructive engagement in the development of the conceptual underpinnings of my theme and working paper. I strongly encourage you all, state parties and other stakeholders to actively engage in this discussion and to adopt my paper. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have now the honor to give the floor to our first panelist, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Professor David J. Francis, who in his previous life as Professor for Peace Studies and an expert on collective security, to start the panel discussion. Professor Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow panelists, in particular, His Excellency Sir Marcelo Ebrard Casabon, Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the United Mexican States, General Retired Crystal Simon Fataki of the Regional Center on Small Arms, Dr. Giovanna Karapik of the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The government of Sierra Leone appreciates the opportunity to serve as president of the 7th Conference of State Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. In this role, we submitted earlier this year a thematic working paper on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. We submitted the paper as our contribution to developing the global rules on the regulation and control
of conventional weapons with a specific reference to small arms and light weapons. Your Excellencies, our journey to the leadership of the Arms Trade Treaty started 7 years ago, and exactly on the 12th of August 2014, when Sierra Leone ratified the Arms Trade Treaty as the 4th African state and the 43rd UN member states to do so. And now 7 years on following that ratification, Sierra Leone serves as the 7th president of the Arms Trade Treaty. This is historic, and we welcome the Gambia's announcement to join the Arms Trade Treaty as the 111th state party to the ATT. Congratulations. Our thematic paper is informed by and reflects our experience of violence and great human suffering resulting from the uncontrolled use of conventional weapons, particularly small arms and light weapons, during our brutal civil war from 1991 to 2002. Distinguished delegates, even as we meet here in Geneva, there are still stark reminders of the war in Sierra Leone. Our bitter experience motivated us to embrace many arms control initiatives. For example, we are members of the ATT, the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, the African Union Silencing the Guns campaign, as well as the ECOWAS Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons, their ammunition, and other related materials. We fully share the ATT community's concerns around weapons diversion. It must be addressed. We believe that we have earned both the moral and legal standing to champion efforts on the international arena to address the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and to prevent their diversion. We have been victims. We do not wish others, Africans, Americans, Asians, Caribbeans, European citizens, citizens of the Middle East, oceanic countries, etc., etc., to go through our own dark and difficult experience relating to small arms and light weapons. So Sierra Leone's call for the ATT community to strengthen efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ensure effective and efficient stockpile management is rooted in the provisions of the ATT itself, including the preamble and Articles 1, 2, 6 to 9, 11, 12, 15, and 16, etc. Distinguished delegates, our thematic paper complements existing initiatives and measures tackling the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and efficient management. In essence, our paper seeks to link the ATT to other international and regional frameworks for arms control and non-proliferation by building on the existing instruments, such as the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, the Human Rights Council resolution, such as Resolution 2435 of 2013 on the impact of arms transfer on human rights in armed conflicts, and Resolution 3212 of 2016, and Resolution 4120 of 2019, relevant to gender and gender-based violence. Your Excellencies, we have sought to lead by example. Sierra Leone adopted numerous measures to comply with our various treaty obligations.
In 2010, our parliament passed the Sierra Leone National Commission on Small Arms Act, establishing for the first time in the history of the nation, the Sierra Leone National Commission on Small Arms. 2 years later, we passed the Arms and Ammunition Act of 2012 for the following reasons. First, to repeal and replace the Arms and Ammunition Act of 1955, well before the end of colonial rule. To provide for the control of the transfer of small arms and light weapons, their ammunition and other related materials from, to, and through Sierra Leone. Thirdly, to provide for the regulation of the manufacture of small arms and light weapons. And finally, to provide for institutional and operational capacities to regulate possession and use of small arms and light weapons within Sierra Leone. So, distinguished delegates, this act provides for the registration, management, and security of stockpiles, possession and use within Sierra Leone, transfer and manufacture and sale of small arms and light weapons. As a result of these efforts, today in Sierra Leone, we have a firmly established system that addresses the proliferation and prevalence of small arms and light weapons. The Sierra Leone National Commission on Small Arms takes the lead in implementing our obligations under the ATT, including producing our annual reports. The Commission enjoys the highest government support as it sits within the office of the President. The Commission also works with other relevant national institutions and collaborates with NGOs, with CSOs, including Safer World, the Mines Advisory Group, etc., etc. Indeed, the ATT has been a strong supporter of the Sierra Leone National Commission on Small Arms. The Commission has benefited immensely from ATT's voluntary trust fund and sponsorship program. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, our thematic paper notes that the ATT creates space for cooperation and assistance between exporting and importing states. Such cooperation helps to combat diversion risks across the life cycle of an arms transfer. Importing and exporting states' collaborative effort begin with export risk assessments. The paper emphasizes that cooperation and assistance programs should not be limited to capacity building. It calls for cooperation in arms export control systems, arms transfer risk assessment, mitigation measures, post-delivery cooperation to prevent diversion, etc. For example, cooperative mitigation measures could require states to share information or good practices in dealing with a shift of the location of imported weapons, change in control or ownership of post-delivery materials. If these examples are built into the experience sharing practices among states, we have a better chance of strengthening the implementation of the ATT. For all these reasons, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, through its presidency of the 6th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty, Sierra Leone proposes a set of possible areas for state parties and other stakeholders to consider for further inquiry and exchange or long-term implementation. We believe that the recommendations on small arms and light weapons, if implemented, will help achieve the core objectives of the Arms Trade Treaty with respect to all categories of weapons under the scope of the treaty. Your Excellencies, let me conclude by encouraging delegations to support wholeheartedly our working paper and endorse its recommendations for implementation by the ATT community. I thank you all.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much for the explication of the paper. I would now like to give the floor to the Foreign Minister of the United Mexican States. His Excellency Marcelo Ebrard Casaubon, who will address the conference via a recorded video. Excellency, you have the virtual space. It's good to see you, Excellency. Welcome.
Gracias. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gracias a todas, a todos por esta oportunidad. Embajador Lanzana Yuberi, presidente de la 7ª Conferencia de Estados, parte de la ATT. Profesor David Francis, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation de Sierra Leona. Distinguidos panelistas, jefes de delegación, señoras y señores, muy buenos días desde la Ciudad de México. Es para mí un honor y una alta responsabilidad representar a nuestro gobierno en este panel sobre el tema principal de la Conferencia de Estados de la ATT. La situación inédita por la pandemia del COVID-19 ha demandado esfuerzos extraordinarios de toda la comunidad internacional. Darnos cita el día de hoy es testimonio de que el trabajo multilateral y la cooperación son la ruta más firme para hacer frente a los grandes problemas mundiales. Como ustedes saben, México ha acompañado desde el proceso mismo de negociación del Tratado sobre el Comercio de Armas los esfuerzos para articular un régimen internacional que permita un mayor y mejor control de las transferencias de armas y municiones. Un comercio más responsable que a su vez prevenga el desvío y tráfico ilícito. Llegar hoy a la 7ª Conferencia de Estados parte nos permite visualizar la consolidación de ese régimen. Al mismo tiempo representa una oportunidad para hacer un balance crítico y llamar con más fuerza al cumplimiento de los compromisos para que sea universal la aplicación del tratado, para que el intercambio de información sea más ágil y para que la presentación integral de informes y de cooperación orientada a crear capacidades nacionales avance más rápido. En los años de instrumentación del ATT no hemos logrado contener el mercado ilícito de armas. Por el contrario, diversos estudios indican que ha crecido. Compañías privadas negligentes y actores no autorizados a nivel global siguen lucrando a costa de la vida y la paz de las personas. México acude hoy ante este foro con la firme convicción de que desde el ATT podemos lograr que mejoren las prácticas y la transparencia en el comercio de armas, fortalecer esquemas que prevengan el desvío, mejorar los análisis de riesgo a la exportación, asegurar mecanismos para la verificación de usos de usuarios finales autorizados, además de promover la perspectiva de género y de atención a las víctimas de la violencia por armas de fuego. Por ello, agradezco y reconozco la visión del presidente de la conferencia presentada en su documento de trabajo sobre fortalecimiento de los esfuerzos para erradicar el comercio ilícito de armas pequeñas y ligeras, que espero se traduzca en renovados compromisos. En América Latina, a pesar de constituir una región en paz, no tenemos ninguna guerra en la región. En Centroamérica y en México se presentan cifras anuales de violencia y muertes por armas de fuego aún mayores que en zonas que tienen conflictos armados. En cerca del 75% de los homicidios está involucrada siempre un arma. A pesar de los numerosos y costosos esfuerzos que llevan a cabo las instituciones mexicanas, por la frontera de nuestro país se calcula que han ingresado ilegalmente más de 230,000 armas cada año. Dicho tráfico corresponde de manera creciente a armas de grueso calibre y armas que solo corresponderían al uso exclusivo de las Fuerzas Armadas. Esto que describo ha incrementado el poder de las organizaciones criminales, mientras que los bolsillos de las compañías productoras y distribuidoras con prácticas irresponsables mantienen ingresos ascendentes. Todos tenemos un papel que jugar y una responsabilidad que asumir para cerrar espacios a este negocio de muertes. Detrás de cada disparo, no solo hay gatillos y casquillos, sino el rostro de una mujer, una niña, un niño, un estudiante o un hombre que sufren a diario las consecuencias de este mercado y que ven interrumpido su futuro y sus posibilidades de desarrollo. La dimensión humana presente en los orígenes del ATT para México es hoy más vigente que nunca. Comparto con ustedes 3 acciones de la estrategia que nos hemos planteado en México para abordar de manera integral este problema. Y espero que sean útiles para el diálogo que hoy sostenemos. Primero, a principios de agosto, el Gobierno de México presentó una demanda contra compañías privadas de Estados Unidos por prácticas intencionales y negligentes en la producción y comercialización de armas que propician el trasiego ilegal, nutren el poder de fuego de las organizaciones criminales y, por consiguiente, contribuyen a la violencia en nuestro país. La Corte Federal de Massachusetts, en Estados Unidos, dio entrada a este litigio, por lo que ahora se encuentra en curso la notificación formal de las demandas y tras ellos va a dar inicio al proceso legal correspondiente. Confiamos en que el resultado de este inédito esfuerzo traiga consigo medidas de reparación que garanticen un comercio de armas responsable y eviten que por dolo o negligencia algunos actores privados sigan alimentando el mercado ilícito de armas. En segundo lugar, México promueve el cumplimiento de las obligaciones internacionales asumidas desde diversos regímenes multilaterales. Con tal propósito, hemos organizado diálogos entre secretariados y órganos de gobierno de los foros y mecanismos que desde diferentes ángulos pueden contribuir a la prevención del tráfico de armas. En nuestra visión es indispensable generar sinergias y espacios de colaboración entre el ATT, el protocolo contra el tráfico que complementa la Convención contra la Delincuencia Organizada y el Programa de Acción de Armas Pequeñas y Ligeras. Solo mediante la complementariedad y la suma de esfuerzos entre gobiernos, organizaciones internacionales, de la sociedad civil, la academia y el sector privado, podremos llegar a cumplir con el ODS 16.4 de la Agenda 2030. Tercero, conscientes de que compartimos con América Latina y el Caribe la preocupación por atender este flagelo, en el ámbito hemisférico México presidirá en los próximos meses la Conferencia de Estados parte de la Convención Interamericana contra la Fabricación y el Tráfico Ilícito de Armas. Esperamos desde ese régimen regional avanzar la responsabilidad compartida que demanda la atención al ciclo completo de la vida de las armas, sus municiones, piezas y componentes. También impulsaremos en el Consejo de Seguridad de la ONU una discusión lo más pronto posible sobre las armas denominadas ligeras, de las que estamos hablando, pequeñas y ligeras, como uno de los problemas principales para el mantenimiento de la paz en el mundo. Con todo este contexto y aprovechando el espacio, en nombre de México hago un llamado atento y firme a todos los estados para hacerse parte del Tratado sobre Comercio de Armas, apelando al interés común de promover sociedades pacíficas y proteger el sentido humanitario. Concluyo agradeciendo al Grupo Regional de América Latina y el Caribe por la confianza depositada en México para llegar a ocupar, tan pronto concluyan los trabajos de esta semana, una vicepresidencia para la 8ª Conferencia de Estados Partes del ATT, posición desde la cual haremos valer las crecientes preocupaciones regionales frente a este fenómeno. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Excellency, for that sobering statement. Thank you very much. I would like to move on to the retired General Christo Simon Fataki. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. Who will speak to us virtually, right? General Fataki, please. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on behalf of Executive Secretary of REXA and that of my own, I thank you for having invited REXA and giving me the floor to share with you the REXA activities in supporting its member state on the small arms intervention. Before I do, I would like to add my voice to those who preceded me in congratulating you on your election as the president of this conference. And I assure you of the cooperation and support of REXA. Mr. President, in accordance with the Article 27 of the UNPOA that calls for the establishment of sub-regional and regional mechanisms, countries in the Great Lakes region and Horn of Africa agreed on a legally binding instrument, the Nairobi Protocol for Prevention, Control, and Reduction of Small Arms and Light Weapons in 2004. In the same spirit, a regional institution, namely Regional Center on Small Arms, REXA, was established in 2005 to coordinate the implementation of the Nairobi Protocol that fit into global commitment contained in the UNPOA, ITI, and ATT. In this regard, REXA Secretariat has supported establishment of 15 national institutions responsible for small arms control and management in the region. Mr. President, in terms of the implementation of the Nairobi Protocol, REXA Secretariat has supported member states to undertake concrete and measurable interventions to enhance physical security and stockpile management, to counter diversion, illicit trade, proliferation, and trafficking of small arms and light weapons. In accordance with provision of the Nairobi Protocol on firearms identification, the REXA Secretariat has provided a total of 81 electronic arms marking machines, associated training and logistical facilitation across the 15 member states who have seen tremendous progress in firearms marking exercises. On traceability, the REXA Secretariat has developed a customized software, RSTS, to support member states in electronic record keeping. The software has already been rolled out in some member states to complement firearms marking and to facilitate reliable information retrieval and tracing. In terms of infrastructure for safe weapons and ammunition storage to curb diversion, the REXA Secretariat has supported the construction of armories in a number of member states. Similarly, REXA has provided a total of 1,900 steel arm boxes to facilitate the safe storage of firearms in remote areas. REXA Secretariat has also been active in supporting the member states to ensure that obsolete, surplus, and collected small arms are destroyed. To date, over 400,000 firearms and more than 2,000 tons of unexploded ordnances and ammunition have been destroyed using various methods. This has reduced the number of small arms in circulation and hence related risk associated with surplus or the obsolete stocks. Mr. President, with any dimension of legislation, the REXA Secretariat has supported the harmonization of national legislations in a number of member states with regional and international instruments on small arms control and management. In this regard, a model law has been developed by REXA Secretariat to guide the harmonization in member states that have not yet done so. To improve the quality of national practice in PSSM, the REXA Secretariat has adopted a train-the-trainers approach to build a pool of 22 regional PSSM instructors who offer contextualized training on best practices in PSSM during the national level seminars. So far, the REXA Secretariat has held 22 national level and 22 regional level PSSM seminars, with at least 877 practitioners trained in international best practices in weapon and ammunition management. In recognition of the role of gender in small arms control, the REXA Secretariat has developed a gender policy to guide mainstreaming of gender in small arms interventions in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and 2250. To facilitate implementation of the Nairobi Protocol, REXA Secretariat has developed best practice guideline on the implementation of the Nairobi Protocol, best practice guideline for practical disarmament, guideline for establishment and functioning of the national institutions responsible for the small arms management and control, and national action plan, which is the major step in the implementation. Mr. President, before I conclude, I would like to state that the challenges associated with the small arms proliferation is to be compared to the political will and commitment to eradicate them, for small arms are not viewed as a security and development problems. More attention is given to redress measures rather than prevention. And most importantly, the current laws in some member states are outdated and often incomplete. They need to be revised and harmonized in accordance with the regional and international instruments. The national institutions on small arms need to be strengthened and capacitated to adequately play their roles in addressing the problem of illicit small arms. There is also need for allowing small arms intervention in the wider development program and making sure that assistance for small arms interventions are long-term so that they can bear meaningful results. Finally, Mr. President, I won't let this opportunity pass by without mentioning that the REXA Secretariat has been supporting its member state to ratify or accede to ATT. So far, REXA has held 2 regional levels and 6 national level awareness workshops on the ATT. It also participated in 2 workshops with East African Legislative Assembly, EALA, and a workshop with Pan-African Parliament to encourage member states to ratify or accede to the ATT. Currently, REXA is technically supporting 4 member states to ratify or accede to the treaty. Despite the numerous achievements, the proliferation of small arms remains a monumental problem to which our collective and comprehensive efforts need to be directed. I thank our member states for their contributions, the ATT Secretariat, and development partners for their support as well. I wish the time would allow to mention them all. I thank you, Mr. President.
And I thank you very much, General Fataki, for the very insightful comments. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the final panelists, Dr. Giovanna Karapic, who is a program manager for Ammunition Management Advisory Team. Dr. Karapic, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on behalf of the Ammunition Management Advisory Team of the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to you and your team for inviting us to be part of this thematic panel. We would also like to thank your team and the Arms Trade Treaty Secretariat for successfully bringing together the 7th Conference of State Parties to the ATT amid the continuing pandemic. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, or AMAT for short, was requested to contribute to this panel with technical and operational reflections on strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ensure efficient stockpile management. AMAT was established in 2019 as a joint initiative of Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining and the United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs. AMAT is a key output in realizing Action 22 of the UN Secretary General's Agenda for Disarmament. Our mandate is to provide technical advice and services to states in safe, secure, and effective stockpile management in line with international best practices, such as the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines. AMAT is uniquely placed to carry out its mandate. We help states reduce the risk of accidental explosions and diversion of arms and ammunition by furthering knowledge, strengthening standards, developing capacities, and facilitating dialogue and cooperation. We provide decision makers, policy, and technical practitioners with the means to bridge the gap between high-level discussions on arms control, treaty, and policy implementation, and on-the-ground concrete efforts to address safety and security challenges through more effective stockpile management. Since small arms and light weapons are closely related with ammunition, effective stockpile management of weapon stockpiles is a key component of the work that we do. For example, advising states on disposal of ammunition that is no longer needed to meet their strategic and operational needs also implies disposal of corresponding weapon systems. Our experience shows that national requests for cooperation and assistance for strengthening stockpile management of small arms and light weapons are actually entry points for states to address the more technically complex and challenging issue area of conventional ammunition management. Export control considerations of arms and ammunition could extend beyond the risk of diversion to states' ability to prevent accidental explosions and effectively maintain an arms and ammunition throughout their life cycle. Safety considerations are important because they broaden the possibility of identifying and addressing risk, including the risk of diversion. Understanding the safety risk posed by surplus ammunition, for instance, often results in surplus destruction and more secure ammunition stockpiles. This inevitably reduces the probability of diversion. Strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons requires recognizing that addressing safety and security shortcomings at the pre-transfer stage are critical for preventing diversion of arms and ammunition later during storage and disposal, for instance. This includes putting measures in place to reduce the risk at the time of production, for example, through adequate marking, at the time of transfer, such as non-transfer clauses and user certificates, authentication of transfer documentation, and the like, at the point of storage, through physical security and inventory management, and during use and disposal, for instance, through verification or of destruction of small arms, light weapons, and ammunition. The backbone of a state stockpile management system is an effective inventory management of both arms and ammunition throughout their life cycle, in line with international best practice guidance included in the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines and the modular Small Arms Control Implementation Compendium, pardon me. Effective inventory management enables a state to detect and prevent diversion of small arms and light weapons and ammunition. It also allows a state to mitigate the risk of accidental explosions by monitoring the quality of stockpiles and identifying and adequately disposing of aging, unstable, and unserviceable ammunition. States with the most severe arms and ammunition management problems might also have a hard time figuring out how to address them. In the words of one state representative, you do not know what your problems are or how to fix them until you know what you have in your stockpile, how much of it you have, what condition it is in, where it is located, what you can use it for, and how to get rid of it. As such, a key component of international cooperation and assistance packages, including those that are implemented under the ATT framework, should be on strengthening in national regulations, procedures, and organizations for inventory management of both arms and ammunition. The illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ammunition does not happen in a vacuum, but occurs within a specific national context of political instability, armed violence, and crime. Context and patterns of diversion matter. Stockpile management measures that succeed in one location might fail somewhere else. Accordingly, there is a need to map what measures work, where, and why, and for states to share relevant information with one another on effective stockpile management measures as one way of addressing diversion. To eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and conventional ammunition requires effective stockpile management that is context responsive and as a result of cooperation between states. The paper prepared by the president of the 7th Conference of State Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty proposes that in addition to sharing relevant information on illicit activities and to further prevent diversion, importing and exporting states could agree to specific conditions and assurances concerning storage facilities, marking of items or end user controls before export approval. Documentation and information provided during the licensing process, including in relation to transfer parties, end use, and end users, provides a degree of assurance for pre-transfer risk assessments. However, currently, there is no way to provide assurance on the effectiveness of national stockpile management practices, a key component in the effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty, as well as putting in place mitigating measures to prevent diversion. Moreover, while various multilateral and national standards and regional guidelines for stockpile management do exist, there is no internationally recognized methodology or mechanism for validating conformity with those international standards. Against this backdrop, through adoption of the EU Council Decision 2020-979, the European Union is funding a project that is looking at establishing a system to validate arms and ammunition policy and practice at the state and sub-state level. In addition to providing a means of assurance regarding the efficacy of national stockpile management practices, this validation system would help states assess the risk of diversion and accidental explosion when they are considering whether to grant an export license. AMAT is implementing this council decision on behalf of the European Union. We are now finalizing the first phase of the project, focusing on a feasibility study, which looks at setting up an internationally recognized arms and ammunition validation system. If established, the system would provide assurance on how well a state's small arms and light weapons and ammunition management practices conform with international and regional best practice throughout the life cycle. The feasibility study, which is supported by an authoritative expert working group, found that there are no red flags, political, legal, economic, or technical, that would prevent the development of a validation system. The study, however, found that it will require a fair amount of political will from exporting and importing states to get a system off the ground. The eventual form the system would take depends greatly on decisions made by states, as multiple paths have been identified. The feasibility study finds that a self-assessment approach, verified by internationally recognized conformity assessment body, is likely the best option. The study also finds that in order to gain global acceptance, the validation system should be developed through a collaborative process of consensus building. Mr. President, on behalf of the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining and the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, I want to thank you again for inviting us to present at the occasion of the ATT CSP7. In the coming days, my colleagues and I look forward to discussing the role of stockpile management and international best practice guidance in preventing diversion and thus addressing the challenge of illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ammunition. Thank you.
I thank you very much, Dr. Karapi. Thank you. Thank you for amplifying the team and for bringing new dimensions to the conversation. Thank you so very much. Dr. Karapi is our last speaker, our last panelist, but the floor is now open to delegations, excellencies, who may want to speak to the theme, and we can do so before wrapping up this particular item. The floor is open. We do have already have the highly efficient secretariat has already gotten a list of people, delegates who would like to make a statement. So we begin. Number one, China, Ambassador Song Lei, Ambassador for the Foreign Affairs of China's permanent mission, to to take the floor. China, please.
谢谢主席。中国代表团祝贺萨拉利昂担任第7届 ATT 缔约国大会主席。我们将积极支持主席的工作。主席先生，这是中国首次以正式成员国的身份参加 ATT 缔约国大会。中国加入 ATT 是积极参与全球武器贸易管理，维护国际和地区和平与稳定的重要举措，充分体现了中国坚定支持多边主义、推动构建人类命运共同体的决心和诚意。中方的书面一般性发言已经提交了秘书处。现在我愿意就轻小武器和库存管理议题做简要的发言。中国高度重视轻小武器非法贸易问题，积极支持和参与国际社会的相关努力。中国对内不断加强内部管理，对外积极参与国际合作，为打击轻小武器非法贸易做出了我们积极的贡献。第一是夯实法律和机制保障，我们颁布实施了枪支管理法、经修订的军品出口管理条例、军品出口管理清单等法律法规。二是强化执法能力和效果，不断完善军工、国防、海关、刑侦、治安等跨部门的合作机制。对轻小武器各环节实施全流程管理。中国执法部门专门建立了枪支管理信息系统，开展专项行动，进一步增强对枪支的监管水平和执法能力。三是完善武器出口管控。中国建立了包括出口商注册登记、国家特许授权、最终用户和用途证明管理在内的完备的武器出口管制制度，认真执行安理会武器禁运相关决议，不向非国家实体或个人出口武器。四是加强国际合作交流。中国坚持向联合国常规武器登记册提交报告，参加了国际弹药技术指南修订工作。我们还在上合组织、中非合作论坛等框架下，向有关国家提供资金、技术和培训，支持消弭非洲枪声倡议。中国高度重视轻小武器库存管理，建立了完整、详细的库存记录和全面严格的库存检查制度，执行严格的武器收发、清点、登记制度。我们实行严密规范的流程手续，确保轻小武器的接收和发放执行严密规范的过程控制。我们还采取了严密的库房安保措施，实行封闭式管理。彻底消除轻小武器非法贸易带来的危害，需要国际社会的携手努力。中方主张，国际社会应秉持共同、综合、合作、可持续的新安全理念，坚持以下几点原则：一是强化国家责任，各国政府应建立和完善相关法律法规，加大执法力度， 同时不向非国家实体转让武器，慎重向冲突和动乱地区出口武器。二是坚持共同治理，共同完善相关国际规则的制定，通过协调行动，共同治理倾销武器问题。三是加强综合治理，汲取历史经验教训，通过政治外交手段解决争端，消除战乱、冲突、恐怖主义和有组织犯罪的根源，从而为根本上解决倾销武器问题创造条件。四是深化国际合作，本着自愿平等的原则，积极参加多双边领域以及区域、次区域等层面的务实合作。发达国家应根据发展中国家的现实困难和需要，加大援助的力度。中国愿与各方一道，共同致力于构建规范合理的武器贸易秩序，妥善解决武器非法转让问题，为建设一个持久和平、普遍安全的世界做出我们应有的贡献。谢谢主席先生。
Thank you very much, Ambassador Song Lee. Thank you. I have 12 more speakers on my list, so I'll call out 3, just so others will be ready to make the statements. We have next Peru, Japan, and the European Union. So I begin with the Ambassador of Peru, my good friend, Ambassador Silvia Alfaro. Peru, take the floor, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Para el Perú es un honor acompañar a Sierra Leona durante esta presidencia como vicepresidente en esta 7ª conferencia de nuestro tratado. Felicito a usted, a su equipo y a la Secretaría del ATT por el esfuerzo en la organización de esta conferencia y por el tema escogido de su presidencia sobre el fortalecimiento de los esfuerzos para erradicar el comercio ilícito de armas pequeñas y ligeras y garantizar una gestión eficiente de las existencias. Agradecemos las reflexiones compartidas por el ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de Sierra Leona, el secretario ejecutivo de REXA y la coordinadora del programa del AMAT. Resaltamos el discurso pronunciado por el ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de México, quien ha descrito elocuentemente el problema del tráfico ilícito de armas en su país y en América Latina y el Caribe, la región que más sufre las consecuencias humanitarias y socioeconómicas de la transferencia ilícita a usuarios finales no autorizados, vinculados muchas veces con el crimen organizado y la delincuencia común. El tráfico ilícito y el desvío de armas amenazan la paz, la seguridad y el desarrollo sostenible de todos los países en el mundo. Afecta el crecimiento económico, genera impactos sociales y agravios que pueden extenderse por generaciones con efectos diferenciados en las mujeres, las adolescentes y los niños. Resulta, por tanto, indispensable seguir sumando esfuerzos a nivel nacional, regional y global. Agradecemos el texto revisado del documento de trabajo de Sierra Leona y endosamos sus 5 recomendaciones, en especial la relativa al uso de los instrumentos internacionales y regionales existentes en materia de armas convencionales para fortalecer la implementación del ATT. El Perú favorece respuestas multilaterales armonizadas y el trabajo en sinergia y complementariedad entre el Tratado sobre el Comercio de Armas y otros acuerdos internacionales, como por ejemplo el Programa de Acción de Naciones Unidas sobre las armas pequeñas y ligeras y el Instrumento Internacional de Localización. El Perú reitera su compromiso con el ATT como herramienta alineada a los objetivos de la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible, en particular la meta 16.4 sobre la reducción significativa de las corrientes de armas ilícitas. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your kind words. Thanks for your support. We now move on to Japan, and at this point, looking at the time, I'll suggest that I'll kindly suggest that speakers generously limit their contributions to around 2 minutes, if possible. Thank you. Thank you very much. Japan, please, Ambassador Ogasawara.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you for your assumption of this very important responsibility at this very difficult juncture. Please be assured of the full support and cooperation of my delegation throughout your presidency. Japan would like to express its sincere appreciation for your leadership and your dedication to prepare and update the working paper on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. The issues of small arms and light weapons remain critical and pose serious challenges to the world today. These issues are multifaceted, and in particular, illicit transfers of SALW to unauthorized recipients and threats of terrorism and conflict should be addressed as a pressing issue. Japan welcomed the adoption of the outcome document at the 7th biennial meeting of states on UN Program of Action for SALW in July this year in New York. As a result, the international community renewed its commitment to implement practical and effective measures to address the issues pertaining to SALW at national, regional, and global levels. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the UN Program of Action, and Japan highly values the synergetic effects it has with the ATT. It is highly recommendable for ATT states parties to seek synergetic effects between those relevant frameworks, which will deepen our discussion on SALW-related programs and create a positive impact on promoting the prevention of illicit trade and diversion of SALW. Japan has engaged in discussions in this field since the 1990s, when the necessity of addressing the issue of SALW was raised and initially discussed within international fora. Japan has jointly submitted annual draft resolutions on small arms and light weapons to UNHCR with Colombia and South Africa. And last December, the most recent resolution was also adopted by consensus. I would like to thank all of the co-sponsoring and supporting countries of the resolution. Japan has supported actions on non-proliferation, collection and disposal of small arms through funding of Saving Lives entity, Salient, a UN funding facility outlined in the UN Secretary General's Agenda for Disarmament, and funding of the initiative of Silence the Guns by the African Union during the African Amnesty Month. Furthermore, in June this year, in collaboration with the Stimson Center, Japan hosted an online seminar focusing on key challenges related to SALW. During the event, lively discussions were held among the distinguished panelists, including Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, and an expert from Small Arms Survey. Exchange also touched upon the issues of human security, recent technological developments such as 3-dimensional printers, as well as gender impacts. These issues are closely related to the ATT. In closing, Japan will continue to engage in the discussion and contribute to the prevention of the global illicit trade in SALW. I thank you, Mr. President.
And I thank you, Ambassador Ogasawara. The European Union, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. First, I will switch off the translation because it causes an echo. All right. At the outset, we want to thank you, Mr. President, for convening us in this hybrid setting, enabling all relevant stakeholders to participate in the conference, either physically or virtually. We welcome your leadership during the important preparatory and intercessional work and for guiding us through this meeting. These are exceptional times. The efforts to promote the Arms Trade Treaty, its universalization, and its implementation are as important as ever. Your continuous efforts in this regard are highly appreciated. We welcome your focus on safe stockpile management and appreciate you taking EU comments on board in your revised paper. The EU wishes to thank the representatives of civil society and industry, many of whom are with us today, for their relentless dedication to promote the ATT. Civil society organizations continued over the past year to sustain targeted activities at national and regional levels in support of ATT universalization. They have also continued to conduct advocacy and engaged in information sharing activities to assist in treaty implementation and increase public awareness, maintaining the prioritization of the treaty on states' political agendas. Arms, including small arms and light weapons, have an indispensable role in the preservation of security, freedom, and peace, provided that they are used in accordance with international law, including human rights law and international humanitarian law. However, such arms are by nature designed to be capable of inflicting death and serious harm. This means that governments that control or transfer weapons must trade, use, and store these arms in a responsible and accountable way. Their diversion, including to unauthorized users, must be prevented. The responsible trade in arms must remain our ambition. Mr. President, the EU would like to welcome those states that ratified or acceded to the treaty since the 5th Conference of States Parties in August 2019. China, Sao Tome and Principe, Afghanistan, and Niue, and have thereby shown their commitment to preventing illicit trade in conventional arms, their diversion to the illicit market, or I think I have some background noise. As ATT states parties and stakeholders, we have a responsibility and are accountable for the decisions we take in regulating the arms trade and the subsequent management of traded arms and ammunition. Accountability requires transparency. The EU makes every effort to ensure that utmost transparency is being exercised with respect to the trade in arms. This enables national parliaments, civil society, and the media to hold informed debates and produce real and tangible accountability, ensuring the effective oversight of the trades in arms in all its aspects. The topic that you, Mr. President, have chosen as the core thematic focus of your ATT presidency and for the 7th Conference of States Parties is intrinsically linked to key objectives of the Arms Trade Treaty, in particular to the prevention of diversion illicit trade and unauthorized use of conventional arms. We welcome your proposal to strengthen efficient stockpile management in order to prevent diversion in the post-delivery phase, including stockpile security and management. In this regard, we support further synergies between various instruments and initiatives, such as the UN Programme of Action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and all its aspects, the POA, the International Tracing Instrument, the Firearms Protocol, the African Union Silencing the Gun Initiative, and ongoing discussions on technical guidelines. Since its adoption in 2001, the EU has been supporting cooperation and assistance to third countries for the implementation of the UN Programme of Action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons in all its aspects, and engaging in ongoing ATT outreach. Most of these projects have a multiple regional scope and are implemented with the help of regional organizations and international partners. These include, but are not limited to, the African Union, ECOWAS, UNREC, and REXA in Africa. And in Europe, the EU works with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and the Southeastern and Eastern Europe Clearinghouse for the Control of SAL, CSAC, that is part of UNDP, including support to the implementation of the roadmap for a sustainable solution to arms control in the Western Balkans by 2024. In Latin America, the EU has worked with the Central American Programme for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons, CASAC, with UNLIREC, and is working with the Organization of American States, the OAS. The EU is also supporting the League of Arab States in the fight against the illicit trade of SAL in cooperation with Interpol and the World Customs Organization. Since 2011, the EU has been supporting Interpol's illicit arms records and tracing management system, IARMS. IARMS is an electronic platform that facilitates information exchange and investigative cooperation between law enforcement agencies. Since 2013, the EU has also been supporting iTrace, a global reporting mechanism on illicit SAL and other illicit conventional weapons and ammunition in conflict-affected areas, implemented by Conflict Armament Research, CAR. The risk of SAL diversion can significantly be reduced by effective arms export control and risk assessment prior to authorizing a transfer. The use of authenticated end-user agreements or documents, as supported by the UN POA and ATT, should be promoted. In January 2021, the Council adopted a decision establishing a common approach on the elements of end-user certificates in the context of the export of SAL and their ammunition. The adoption of this Council Decision 2021-38 represents another important step towards further convergence in arms export policies of EU member states. It also contributes to reducing the risk of arms diversion, creating a level playing field, and increasing clarity for the defense industry and its clients. The safe and secure management of small arms and light weapons and ammunition stockpiles is critical in the prevention of illicit proliferation and accidental explosions. From its inception, the UN Programme of Action recognized stockpile management as one of the key responsibilities of the state in their efforts to prevent the diversion of SAL, and is relevant to much of our work within the ATT. Since the adoption of the Council Decision 2020-979, the EU, in cooperation with the Ammunition Management Advisory Team, AMAT, of the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, has been exploring the possibility of developing an internationally recognized system to validate the arms and ammunition management practices and policies implemented by states and their armed forces. As indicated in the EU strategy against illicit firearms, small arms and light weapons and their ammunition, that was adopted by the Council of the European Union on 19 November 2018, the EU commits to continue supporting cooperation and assistance for the implementation of the UN Programme of Action and the ATT, with a focus on regional cooperation, and to participate in and support coordination with other donors. The European Union commits to full cooperation and coordination in preventing illicit trade of arms. The EU also commits to the provision of guidance in relation to efforts to combat the illicit trade of arms to any of its ATT partners, in line with the recommendations of the Chair's paper. Thank you, Mr. President.
And I thank you very much. Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you. Thank you so very much for your kind words and your support of our TMAC paper. Thank you. I'll call out the next 4 speakers on my list. We are obviously way behind schedule, but we have several more speakers. So we have on my list, beginning with Spain, and then Namibia, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. The delegate from Spain, please, to the floor. Thank you, European Union. Excellent.
Señor presidente, al ser esta la primera vez que mi delegación toma la palabra en esta 7ª conferencia de Estados parte, permítame felicitarle por su nombramiento. Le aseguro igualmente el total apoyo de mi delegación en el cumplimiento de su mandato. Nuestra declaración general se ha entregado a la Secretaría por escrito para su publicación. España suscribe la declaración pronunciada ahora mismo por la delegación de la Unión Europea, pero no obstante deseo hacer algunos comentarios adicionales a título nacional. Señor presidente, mi delegación celebra la elección de las armas pequeñas y ligeras y la gestión de sus existencias como tema central de nuestras discusiones bajo su presidencia, y agradezco las intervenciones de los panelistas muy interesantes para enfocar adecuadamente el tema. La gestión de las armas pequeñas y ligeras está estrechamente relacionada con algunos de los objetivos principales del tratado: la prevención de los desvíos y de los tráficos ilícitos. También está igualmente vinculada con uno de los objetivos básicos de la Agenda de Desarme del Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas, que es la protección de la vida de las personas. Por eso, nuestra acción debe complementarse y coordinarse con los otros foros e instrumentos internacionales que ya gozan de existencia en este ámbito. Por este motivo, señor presidente, mi delegación apoya su proyecto de documento de trabajo dirigido a erradicar el comercio ilícito de armas pequeñas y ligeras. El eje central será el fortalecimiento de una gestión eficiente de los arsenales para así evitar desvíos y mejorar el control de las armas en la fase posterior a su venta. El tratado ya nació para tener un efecto real y concreto sobre las personas. Propuestas como la que debatimos hoy nos ayudan a vincular, si cabe, el tratado con la realidad. Por tanto, a proteger más y mejor la vida de las personas. Para nuestra delegación esta es una cuestión prioritaria y hemos acumulado años de experiencia en este ámbito, especialmente en lo que se refiere a las municiones. Por eso, hemos apoyado el desarrollo de varios elementos recientes de cooperación internacional a los que me voy a referir. Nuestra estrecha colaboración con los expertos de UNIDIR en la elaboración de su manual para elaborar estudios de perfilamiento de municiones de armas pequeñas en contextos de violencia armada, así como su publicación en lengua española. Este manual tiene como objetivo aumentar los datos de referencia sobre los tipos, patrones y orígenes de las municiones, fortalecer las capacidades locales y servir de base para apoyar los esfuerzos de autoridades nacionales y locales para reducir la violencia armada. Por otro lado, España ha apoyado financieramente los esfuerzos de AMAT y del Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, una institución que, como bien ha explicado la señora Cara Pique en su intervención, centra sus esfuerzos en el fortalecimiento de las capacidades nacionales de gestión de municiones. Además, España pone a disposición de los Estados parte su experiencia en la gestión de existencias de armas pequeñas y ligeras y de su munición, ya sea para evitar desvíos o accidentes o para actuar después, como desafortunadamente tuvimos que hacer cuando en el mes de marzo Guinea Ecuatorial sufrió un grave incidente en su base militar de Nkuantomo. Por lo tanto, señor presidente, finalizo reiterándole el agradecimiento de mi delegación por haber elegido este tema como discusión prioritaria de nuestra conferencia de Estados parte y apoyo su documento de trabajo. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Excellency Spade. Thank you. And I will give you the floor to my friend, Ambassador Julia Emmanuel Chanduru of Namibia. Ambassador Chanduru, please, Julia.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Republic of Namibia, I would like to congratulate you, Mr. President, and your team on a successful tenure as the President of the 7th Conference of State Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. I would also like to express my gratitude to the ATT Secretariat for their hard work and to the panelists for their insightful presentations. Mr. President, Namibia became a state party on 28 April 2020 and has taken note of the importance to regulate arms in the world, especially small arms and light weapons within our region, where they have become weapons of mass destruction, as in most developing countries. It is unfortunate that the flow of small arms and light weapons into developing regions has increased. To curb the transfer of small arms and light weapons, Namibia has committed to the African Union Declaration on Silencing the Guns in Africa by 2030, and the implementation of the African Union Border Management Program, as well as, of course, ratifying the Arms Trade Treaty. Namibia also adheres to the SADC Protocol on the control of firearms, ammunition, and other related material. To this end, this year, Namibia commemorates the African Amnesty Month during September and will continue to do so until 2030 by urging its nationals and all its inhabitants to surrender all illegally acquired and unlicensed firearms, armaments, and ammunition to the Namibian police. Namibia wishes to inform the conference that in collaboration with the Arms Control Arms, the second phase of the Southern Africa Academy on the Arms Trade Treaty funded by the ATT Voluntary Fund took place from 16 to 20 August 2021, virtually. The focus of the training was on Articles 5, 6, 9, 11, and 13 of the ATT. Namibia therefore urges all state parties, signatories, and non-state parties to strictly adhere to the transfer obligation as obtained in the ATT, as well as in other international instruments to reach our ATT objectives and to ultimately eradicate illicit and illegal small arms, light weapons within our territories. My delegation underscores the importance of the gender-based violence provision of the Arms Trade Treaty under Article 7.4, whereby it is illegal to transfer weapons if there is a risk that the weapons will be used to facilitate gender-based violence. Mr. President, the full implementation of the treaty remains achievable with the full cooperation of all of us, as we continue to, and I quote, seek to promote the establishment and management of international peace and security with the least diversion for armament of the world's human and economic resources, unquote, as per the UN Charter. My delegation pledges its support to the implementation of the ATT. We also remain committed to the UN Program of Action to prevent, combat, eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons in all its aspects. Mr. President, you can count on my delegation's full support during this meeting. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you so very much for your wonderful statement of support. I now yield the floor to Switzerland.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la parole. Au nom de la délégation suisse, j'aimerais tout d'abord vous remercier pour votre engagement et votre soutien continu au TCA. Nous apprécions la manière dont vous vous acquittez de votre tâche, malgré les difficultés auxquelles nous sommes confrontés en ces temps de pandémie de la COVID-19. Nous sommes convaincus que, sous votre direction avisée, nous pourrons progresser dans la mise en œuvre du traité. Nous vous remercions pour votre document de travail sur les efforts visant à éradiquer le commerce illicite des armes légères et de petit calibre et à renforcer la gestion sûre et sécurisée des stocks. Il s'agit de deux thèmes importants pour lesquels des progrès dans la mise en œuvre sont nécessaires. Nous estimerions opportun de procéder à une cartographie des instruments internationaux et régionaux et pertinents en la matière, ainsi que d'utiliser au mieux les orientations qu'ils fournissent et les mécanismes qu'ils comprennent. À cet égard, les efforts menés par les États participants de l'OSCE pour mettre à jour le guide de bonnes pratiques de l'OSCE sur les armes légères et de petit calibre et le guide de bonnes pratiques sur les stocks de munitions conventionnelles seront certainement pertinents. La Suisse salue également votre initiative de formaliser la discussion entre les États parties sur la coopération en matière de prévention des détournements d'armes, tout particulièrement dans la phase post-exportation. La Suisse y contribuera avec son expertise et expérience dans le cadre des groupes de travail, comme prévu dans leur plan de travail pluriannuel. Monsieur le Président, la Suisse soutient vos recommandations et se réjouit de la poursuite de la coopération entre les États parties dans leur mise en œuvre. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Switzerland. Thank you for the support. I now call upon my friend, couldn't see him for a while actually, Ambassador Little, United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's a pleasure to see you. As this is the first time the UK delegation takes the floor, let me congratulate you very warmly on your assumption of the presidency of the 7th Conference of States Parties and assure you and your team of my delegation's continued full support. My delegation also warmly welcomes your presidency's focus on strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ensure efficient stockpile management, and your revised working paper. Full and effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty is essential in supporting these efforts. As the paper sets out, a strong export licensing system with a comprehensive risk assessment prior to the transfer of small arms and light weapons is critical. We must ensure, however, that we do not create unnecessary barriers and unrealistic requirements for state parties. This would be to the detriment of effective implementation of the treaty and the reinforcement of international security safeguards that full adherence can achieve. The UK welcomes the paper's focus on gender and the call for the full, equal and effective participation of women in all aspects of the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. The UK supports this objective and the recognition of the differing effects on women, men, girls and boys of the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. We were pleased to support similar language on gender in the recent UNPOA Biennial Meeting of States report, an example of the synergies between our work here and discussions in other fora, which His Excellency Mr. Ebrard mentioned earlier. The UK is also leading a review of OSCE best practice guidance on small arms and light weapons stockpile management, and is a committed participant in the group of government experts on ammunition stockpiles. Finally, I would like to join His Excellency Professor Francis in stressing the importance of international cooperation. The UK provides a range of capacity building programmes as part of defence and security reform projects, counter-proliferation initiatives, and conflict prevention and resolution interventions. The UK was pleased to support an ammunition management advisory team project last year which created a comprehensive training program on the International Ammunition Technical Guidelines. We are supporting a further project this year, which will digitalize the guidelines, allowing states to easily access and apply best practice processes to the safe management of ammunition stockpiles. Once again, let me express my delegation's gratitude for the important work the presidency has done and the leadership you have shown on this crucial issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Lido. Thank you, and thank you for your support. Thank you very much. We have, let me read out the list of countries remaining on our speakers list. We have next Hungary and Republic of Korea, France, Ireland, and Romania in that order. After that, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor Francis, will give the closing statements ending this agenda item. So I yield the floor to Hungary, please.
Chairperson, Hungary associates itself with the statement that was delivered on behalf of the EU. Nevertheless, I wish to make a few remarks to this particular discussion from a national perspective. First of all, I would like to thank you, Sierra Leone, for leading the preparations for the 7th Conference of the State Parties through a very challenging year. We are particularly glad for the choice of strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and ensuring efficient stockpile management as the priority theme. Undoubtedly, the illicit trafficking in small arms and light weapons and their diversion represent a very serious threat to security, as these weapons kill or injure more people than any other kind of weapons. Hungary fully shares the view that stockpile management is key to preventing diversion in the post-delivery phase. We welcome the approach of the Presidency's working paper suggesting that we need to explore and further enhance synergies between the ATT and other international instruments that are relevant in this area. In this spirit, Hungary has recently been active in preventing the diversion of salt by enhancing stockpile security in Southeast Europe. Hungary has been focusing its efforts to support the Western Balkan countries to find a viable solution to the illegal possession, misuse, and smuggling of these weapons. In concrete terms, in order to have the efforts of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro to further decrease the risk of proliferation of firearms, ammunition, and explosives, and to mitigate the consequences of stockpiling those weapons and ammunition, Hungary has provided a financial support of 250,000 euros to 2 projects with the framework of the OSCE. The project entitled Safety and Security Upgrade of Bosnia and Herzegovina Ammunition and Weapons Storage Sites aims at enhancing the capacity of the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina to manage weapons and ammunition in line with international best practices. The objective of the project called Mitigation of Safety and Security Risk related to stockpiles of conventional ammunition in Montenegro is to reduce the risk of explosion at munition sites and diversion of small arms and light weapons or stockpile of conventional ammunition from the Ministry of Defense storage sites. Small arms and light weapons are highly relevant issues to countries in all continents and to a range of international fora. We support that proper follow-up be given to it in the framework of the ATT as well. Chairperson, we request the effort Sierra Leone as president of the CSP7 in cooperation with the predecessor Argentina and the Secretariat have been in order to advance the new resolution of the treaty. We are grateful for that. In conclusion, let me confirm that Hungary continues to support wholeheartedly the objectives of the treaty as well as its implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Hungary. Thanks for the support as well. Thank you. I now move on to Republic of Korea, please. Ambassador Sang Byung Lim.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency of the 7th Conference of the State Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. I have confidence that this year's CSP will be successful with your able leadership. Please be assured of my delegation's full support throughout the course. My delegation is also grateful to all the panelists for their insightful remarks. On the thematic discussion on the small arms and light weapons and stockpile management, the Republic of Korea appreciates that the discussion on the theme highlighted the importance of the stockpile management and the prevention of diversion of SALW in the ATT framework. I agree that the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons can hamper the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and negatively impact gender-based violence. The recommendations in the President's working paper are specific and clearer than the previous version in June. We support the adoption of the recommendations and stress the synergy with other international instruments, including the POA. Mr. President, the Republic of Korea is doing its best to tackle the illegal trade of SALW by way of establishing a structured system for marking, record keeping, and tracing the weapons. Since the Korean military and police agencies have an electronic system which manages the distribution of arms on the basis of national laws, they can respond efficiently in case of urgency, such as the detection of the missing arms. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you very much, Korea Ambassador. Thank you so very much. I now yield the floor to France.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, et permettez-moi de vous féliciter pour votre direction responsable dans ce contexte contraint et soyez assurés du plein soutien de la France à vos efforts. La France se joint à la déclaration prononcée par l'Union européenne et souhaite formuler à titre national les éléments suivants. Nous vous remercions pour votre papier et saluons en particulier la proposition de retenir comme thème principal de nos échanges cette année la consolidation des efforts visant à éradiquer le trafic illicite d'armes légères et de petit calibre. La prévention et la lutte contre le trafic d'armes classiques est l'un des deux piliers du traité sur le commerce des armes. Et la France s'est tout particulièrement investie sur cette question en soumettant plusieurs non-papiers dédiés à ce sujet, ainsi qu'à celui de la lutte contre le détournement des armes légalement transférées. Nous saluons, Monsieur le Président, l'introduction d'un langage dans votre document sur les questions du genre, ainsi que sur la référence aux objectifs de développement durable, et enfin l'appel à rechercher des synergies avec les autres instruments existants. Nous soutenons globalement les orientations évoquées dans ce papier, qui est à la fois clair et ambitieux, ainsi que les recommandations qui sont formulées. Nous souhaitons en particulier formuler 3 remarques. S'agissant de la recommandation numéro 2, il nous paraît important de souligner que cette coopération ne peut se faire que sur la base du volontariat et que ça puisse être reflété dans ce document. Sur la recommandation numéro 3, la proposition relative aux conditions de garantie spécifiques concernant les installations de stockage qui pourraient être agréées entre les États exportateurs et importateurs nous semble pertinente. Toutefois, il nous semble que cette proposition pourrait s'avérer très difficile à mettre en œuvre concrètement. Cela nécessitera que ce soit fait lorsque c'est possible. Sur la recommandation numéro 4, enfin, la France salue le langage actuel qui consiste à un encouragement des États parties à l'échange d'informations sur les mesures prises en matière de gestion des stocks et sur les mesures d'atténuation des risques en lien avec l'article 7.4. Nous remercions également la présidence d'avoir précisé ces recommandations par la mention « including related to stockpile security ». Monsieur le Président, soyez assurés du soutien de la France et de notre implication dans les travaux relatifs au traité sur le commerce des armes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, France. Thank you, Ms. Bentijet. Thanks for your support, and we'll take your points into consideration. Now move on to Ireland, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. President, Ireland aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union and would like to add the following remarks in a national capacity. Ireland has also submitted a general statement in writing for inclusion in the record of the conference. President, as this is my first time taking the floor, please allow me to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency and to thank you and your team for your leadership during the preparatory process. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to the Secretariat for its work over the past year in very difficult circumstances. Ireland assures you of our full support and cooperation. President, Ireland welcomes the thematic focus of this CSP on small arms and light weapons and stockpile management. We regard the ATT as a vital instrument in the international community's efforts towards regulating the trade in conventional arms and eliminating illegal arms transfers. Our shared goal is a safer and more secure world, as envisaged in the ambitious 2030 agenda. Strict and effective stockpile management is an essential tool in preventing the diversion of conventional arms. Poorly managed, insecure, or unsafe stockpiles can be vulnerable to theft, looting, corruption, and illegal sale, fueling diversion and the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. In turn, the presence of illicit arms can be destabilizing and is closely correlated to higher rates of violence, including sexual and gender-based violence. While remaining conscious of the need to address the root causes of conflict, national efforts must be complemented by sustainable governance, including comprehensive arms export and transfer controls, regulation, and risk mitigation. President, your working paper highlights the necessity of urgent action to combat diversion in the post-delivery phase and sets out a clear path for how the ATT can tackle the issue. We welcome the proposal to better utilize and map existing guidance to help tackle the illicit trade in SOL and strengthen stockpile management. Many excellent reports and guides have been prepared by international and regional organizations in recent years, which can and should be leveraged to enhance ATT implementation. To this end, we would encourage states to consult UNODA's recent paper on the incorporation of gender perspectives in ammunition management, an area frequently overlooked in diversion, which Ireland was proud to help support. We support your proposal to explore the many crucial interlinkages the ATT shares with key international frameworks, such as the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, and regional initiatives, such as the African Union's Silencing the Guns. It is through supporting these mutually beneficial instruments that we can best amplify our collective efforts against illicit arms. Lastly, we strongly endorse the proposal to encourage information exchange on Article 7.4 on gender-based violence. These are critical issues and necessary to demonstrate that states parties are committed to the full implementation of the decisions taken at the 5th Conference of States Parties. The 2020 report of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights examining gender and arms focused heavily on the diversion of arms and unregulated or illicit arms transfers. It highlighted how these practices have a gendered impact on the human rights of women and girls. In order for us to address armed violence and weapons diversion in all its forms, it is necessary to acknowledge the differentiated gendered impacts of these issues and tailor policy responses accordingly. President, we support each of your proposed outputs as tangible, practical measures which would enhance treaty implementation. Ireland stands ready to assist in these efforts and hopes that this conference will agree to these concrete measures to advance the implementation and application of the treaty and realise its potential to help create a more secure and peaceful world. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Ireland, thank you. Thank you for the great support. Thanks. My last speaker from the floor is Romania. Ms. Julia Vladescu, Romania, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am mindful of the time, so I will try to be brief. At the outset, please allow me to join other speakers in thanking you for organizing the 7th Conference of States Parties in this hybrid setting, which allows a broad participation of all the ATT stakeholders. I express my delegation's appreciation for the highly diligent and constructive way you led the preparatory process of this conference, and I assure you of our full support and cooperation. While Romania fully shares the points raised in the European Union statement, we would like to underline some aspects in our national capacity. Romania welcomes the thematic focus of the presidency, which is intended to firmly link ATT implementation efforts to the global framework of arms control, non-proliferation, and disarmament. We express our full support for the proposed set of possible areas that were put forward for states parties' consideration. Romania has constantly developed laws, regulations, and administrative procedures to enhance its national export control system, an essential component of our foreign policy that has at its very heart the international and regional peace, as well as stability and sustainable development. We attach great importance to predictability and responsibility in self-transfers in order to prevent destabilizing accumulation or misuse of such weapons. The Romanian policy on self-transfers is convergent with the goals envisaged in the ATT, the UN Programme of Action, the International Tracing Instrument, the UN Firearms Protocol, and in regional initiatives within the European Union, OSCE, and Wassenaar Arrangement. As some of these instruments have made significant progress in developing good practices in tackling the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons and enhancing stockpile security, we support further synergies. Even though we would have liked to have more time for in-depth discussions on this important topic in this cycle, we acknowledge that the exceptional and unprecedented format of this year's meetings made this a challenge. In any case, we believe that the recommendations you made in your paper allow for further information sharing, and we stand ready to continue exchanging good practices on the matter with the entire ATT community in the working group on effective treaty implementation or other relevant subsidiary bodies, to learn from other partners' experience and to continue to adapt our export control system to further developments in the area. Thank you, Mr. President.
And thank you very much, Romania. Thank you for the support. We will now end this section with a statement, a concluding statement from the Honorable Minister of Sierra Leone Foreign Affairs, Professor David Francis.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we conclude this discussion on the CSP7 President's thematic paper, I'm encouraged by the statements of support and endorsement from all delegations that have taken the floor. In this regard, I note the interest expressed in our theme as reflected in the adoption of the ATT 2020 resolution. I particularly note the active engagement of states parties and all other stakeholders, including civil society organizations, in developing our theme and working paper. I reiterate my call and that of my President, His Excellency, Dr. Julius Maada Bio, encouraging state parties to endorse the 5 recommendations in the working paper. We strongly believe that these recommendations will enhance all our collective efforts in addressing the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. Second, will strengthen existing measures such as export assessment, arms transfer documentation, post-delivery cooperation, and stockpile security at the national level. Third, enhance information exchange on national best practices on efficient stockpile management and security. Lastly, enhance technical cooperation under the treaty. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I encourage you all to endorse the 5 recommendations of the thematic working paper as your historic contribution to universalize the Arms Trade Treaty and its effective implementation. This is your historic contribution to global peace and security. I thank you. And I thank you very much, Honorable Minister, Excellency, Professor David Francis, for those closing remarks. I thank you all delegates for the unanimous support for the paper. I thank you for the great participation. Since we have gone way above our time for today, we will have to adjourn this meeting and continue tomorrow with a couple of items with which my partner and I, Argentina, will begin tomorrow. So I yield the floor now to the Secretariat, Mr. Secretary, to make a few announcements with respect to the remaining items of the agenda going forward. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I just take the platform or the floor to make announcements for this afternoon. As you'll be aware, we have quite a number of side events planned for the duration of this week. But today we've got 2 side events that will be taking place immediately after this conference. Details of them are on the website. But I take the opportunity just to announce those side events. The first one is a side event, is the launch of the ATT Monitor 2021 Annual Report. It's a side event that normally takes place every year. It will start immediately after this conference and to run until 6 p.m. You're encouraged to join that launch of the ATT Monitor 2021 Annual Report. The second one is a side event with the title, The Role of Women in Stockpile Management. So it is hosted by Gender Equality Network for Small Arms Control. And again, you are encouraged to join that. Tomorrow morning, we have a side event starting at 11:30. It is hosted by the Secretariat in the government or the government of New Zealand. It's about the ATT Voluntary Trust Fund during COVID times. So again, you are invited to participate or to join that side event. I'll make announcements about side events for the afternoon tomorrow when we start the conference. The links to join these side events is available on the website. And if you go to our website to the relevant page, you'll find the links to these websites. The Secretariat would, on a separate note, would be posting statements that were delivered here by consent of those who have delivered them. We'll start to upload them tomorrow, meaning some statements for today would appear tomorrow. And again, we encourage the delegates to always forward to us their statements so that they can be uploaded as appropriate. Mr. President, I thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
I thank you all. I thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I thank you all. And I hope to see you tomorrow for the remaining items, which will begin on time, and hopefully we wrap up on time. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the support. Thank you. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this my card?
Alexandria, who's looking at.